A wonderful good morning. Hello, everybody. Happy Monday and welcome, everyone. Dear members, dear observers, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, I warmly welcome you to this 2025 edition of the International Conference of Information Commissioners. It's lovely to have you in Berlin. Thank you. As you all know, the ICIC serves as a global platform dedicated to promote access to public information. And in its mission, it's about sharing knowledge and sharing best practices, of course. It's about building capacity and act as a collective voice in international fora. And there's always the goal, of course, of strengthening the muscle when it comes to the public's rights to information and supporting the transparency and accountability in institutions that are serving to the public. And this year, ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, we focus and we are gathered to focus on a very special theme when it comes to the growing urgency and relevance. It's about low threshold access to environmental information. This is the core of our conference now, with a particular emphasis when it comes to the digital solutions that are already in place, but that, of course, are needed as well. And over the course of our gathering, ladies and gentlemen, we will explore a little bit how civil society, how the media, and how public institutions, of course, how can they work together? How can they improve the access to environmental data? What's needed to raise more awareness when it comes to environmental issues? And how to empower individuals to actively participate in protecting our shared planet? And with that, we all look forward to the insights, to your thoughts, and of course to our discussions here on stage, in the different rooms, but also when we are mingling in the networking sessions, because this is also when people come together, when solutions are getting designed. This is the core of conferencing, and this is, of course, also the core of our 2 days conference now. My name is Katie Gallos. I'm so thrilled and excited to meet you all, to see you all, and of course to debate with you for the upcoming days. I'll be your moderator, but I'm not just by myself, because my colleague Lina Rouge, yes, she's at the back. Please turn around. We are double trouble, so to say, for you. In different rooms. Lina, looking forward to be with you on this team. She's the moderator upstairs on the 3rd floor, exactly for the other panels taking place there. And as I'm a geologist and geographer by nature and by studies, I'm thrilled to give you some navigation points of the conference. Please allow me to share with you some logistical notes before we're diving into the topic. Please always wear your badge. That's crucial for the organizational part. And then, of course, it's about talking with each other, not just about each other. And therefore, we have our translators in the back. And you can see the channels. We have 3 different languages. English is channel 1, if you need a translation device. Channel 2 is français. Alors, bienvenue à tout le monde ici qui parle français. Et espagnol, Spanish is channel 3. If you are in the need of a translation device, please also find the colleagues at the information counter for the translation device. And then, just a little exclamation mark. Please leave the translation devices in the room, because otherwise we will be charged by the hotel. Right? And it's going to be a technical difficulty, of course, to find all the devices again. So please take off the translation devices the moment when you're leaving the room. You are here at the Palais, the room Palais. The academy floor where Lina will be based is on the 3rd floor. And of course also we have a photographer here in the room, and he will take photographs. So if you prefer not to be photographed, you may indicate that by taking a dot on your name tag, so the photographer will know that he will not take a photograph of you. And then, of course, about mobility, right? But going and coming back and forth. There is a shuttle service in service, and it's available from various meeting points here to the very famous Hotel Adlon and the social event venues for any questions regarding the logistics, regarding the shuttles. Of course, the colleagues at the information counter, they are there for you. So please, 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 please burn with your questions, right? And ask them all your questions that you have. The colleagues of the organizational team, they have colored badges, so they will be easily identified. Okay, and then, oh my goodness, I feel it already. Hotter. Yeah? You're not in the spotlight yet, but you will be, of course, in the spotlight of this conference. Please bear with us. We had a technical issue here with the hotel. They are working with all the forces that I can actually fix the cable, but, you know, energy flows where your attention goes. So let's just ignore the heat, and then we will be okay. Yes, as I mentioned, the hotel is working on it. Thanks for your understanding. All right, I think we are all settled to start into our conference. I warmly welcome now our first speaker here on stage for the official welcome speeches. She's the Federal Commissioner for Data Protection and Freedom of Information of Germany. Please give her a big round of applause, Professor Dr. Luisa Specht-Riemenschneider.
Thank you. Wow. Dear Madam State Secretary Schwarze-Leal-Suter, dear ICIC Secretariat, esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the 16th editions of the International Conference of Information Commissioners here at the historic Hotel Adlon Kempinski in Berlin. Welcome to all of you, warm welcome to all of you. It's so great to have you all here. On April 7th in 2003, in the south of Berlin, 14 Freedom of Information officers and ombudspersons signed the Declaration of Cooperation and thus founded the ICIC. It was in 2003 here in Berlin. A warm welcome to 3 of the founding fathers of the ICIC who are with us today. Thank you so much for coming. I'm really pleased that you all could make it to Berlin in times of uncertainty and war in many regions of the world, travel restrictions and political challenges that pose threats not only to the freedom of information. So it's great that you made it. Welcome to Berlin, welcome to Germany, from me and from my whole team, and also from my colleagues from Germany. Over the next few days, we want to engage in vital discussions on a topic of pressing global importance. It is access to environmental information in a digital era. As we are all aware, environmental challenges such as climate change, as we all challenge today, and biodiversity loss transcend borders. The data and information related to these issues are crucial for informed decision-making, for accountability, and for fostering a sustainable future. Yet, access to this information remains uneven across countries and communities, often hindered by legal and also by technological and by social barriers. Even with my work on data protection, I'm committed to help to find solutions, and I feel exactly the same way about such barriers to free flow of information. I'm really looking forward to being inspired by all of you, hear about your specific challenges and solutions, and brainstorm with you how we can take next steps as a community of commissioners and experts. This conference provides a unique platform for us to share knowledge, exchange best practices, and explore innovative solutions to improve access to environmental data and also beyond. We will examine how digital technologies can enhance transparency, can facilitate cross-border information sharing, and can empower citizens, especially marginalized groups, to participate actively in environmental governance. Our discussions will also focus on evaluating international legal frameworks like the Aarhus Convention and the Escazú Agreement, which establish vital rights to access environmental information, public participation, and also access to justice. By understanding these frameworks and their implementation, I'm really convinced that we can identify gaps and opportunities for strengthening environmental transparency worldwide. Furthermore, we will highlight the role of civil society, which is so important, and media in raising awareness on holding authorities accountable. Their contributions are essential in creating a culture of openness and ensuring that environmental data serves the public interest. I'm very confident, let me say that the insights and collaborations developed during this conference will really contribute significantly to advancing the right to environmental information globally. I'm convinced that together we can foster a more transparent, inclusive, and sustainable future, on where information empowers communities and protects our planet. Because in the end, freedom of information is the basis for democracy. Thank you all for your dedication and for your participation. I'm really looking very much forward to the fruitful discussions and meaningful connections that will emerge over the course of this event. Let's make these days a catalyst for positive change. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Commissioner. And now I hand over for our second welcome speech to the Information and Data Protection Commissioner joining us from Albania, Mr. Besnik Dervishi. The stage is yours.
Distinguished colleagues, honorable commissioners, representatives of national and international institutions, civil society and stakeholders. It is a deep honor and a true pleasure to be here with you in Berlin. As the previous host of the International Conference of Information Commissioners held in Tirana, and in my capacity as interim chair of the ICIC, allow me to sincerely thank the organizers of this conference for their warm hospitality and the professionalism that has made this event so meaningful for our global community. This conference is not merely a meeting of institutions. It is a call to action and reflection. It is a moment where voices from across the world unite to reaffirm a fundamental truth. The right to information is the oxygen of democracy. It is a cornerstone of accountability, citizen participation, and trust building. Allow me to share a personal reflection. Having spent decades working with laws, regulations, and administrative procedures, both in judiciary and central governance, I have seen firsthand one of the greatest challenges to the effective functioning of public administration, the lack of transparency. This experience has reinforced for me the essential need for open and accountable institutions. Those of us who have worked in public service know well. Documents may get lost along the way, but requests for accountability always find their destination. Over the years, I have witnessed the practical importance of the right of access to information. Citizens demand to be informed about matters that affect their daily lives, whether it's the management of natural resources or the quality of public services. At the same time, transparency has consistently proven to be an effective tool for strengthening institutional responsibility and deepening the relationship between public authorities and the people they serve. This year's theme, access to environmental information in the digital age, is more than a topic. It is a call for earnest and meaningful action. At a time when environmental challenges threaten the well-being of future generations, the right to know is not merely a legal entitlement. It is a vital right, a right that must not be optional. It is our duty to uphold it. In this context, the ICIC has a pivotal role to play. This network is not just a platform for exchange experiences. It has the potential to serve as a global reference point, offering vision, shared standards, practical tools, and meaningful support to member institutions. A network that does not speak only once a year, but one that reacts, acts, and leads consistently. Let me also underscore a fundamental truth. Institutions entrusted with safeguarding the right to information must themselves be strong institutions. We must explore and implement ways to ensure our institutions remain steadfast in their mission, independent from political shifts, and that their relationship with public authorities are governed first and foremost by institutional loyalty. I am convinced that the way forward lies in institutional consolidation, structural resilience, and a shared international agenda. In this regard, successful initiatives like the ICIC working groups demonstrate what we can achieve together, a network that not only identifies challenges but also delivers solutions. In today's digital world, where information is the most valuable currency, we must aspire towards a universal model of proactive transparency, a model that can be tailored to each country's specific context but grounded in common principles. Such a step would bring us closer to a form of transparency that is not request-based but integrated into good governance by design. Dear colleagues, this conference is not just an opportunity to listen to each other. It is an opportunity to build together. Let us emerge from this gathering not only with new ideas, but with concrete commitments, new partnership, and a renewed sense of responsibility towards the citizen we represent. Civil society, academia, and international organizations are our natural partners in this journey. Without their engagement, none of our goals would be possible. Let us work to make the ICIC stronger, more inclusive and responsive in real time. Let us defend and promote the right to information, not only as a principle on paper, but as a lived and protected reality every day in every corner of the world. Thank you for your attention and your continued cooperation. I wish you a fruitful discussion and every success in the days ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I take this occasion to you, of course, for a friendly reminder to the ICIC members who have not yet casted their vote when it comes to the election of the chair and the secretariat position. The electronic platform will be still open until tonight, midnight. That's your deadline, the latest. Okay, now we continue with our keynote speakers, and it's my big pleasure to welcome her on stage. With us is the Parliamentary State Secretary of the Ministry for Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety in Germany. Please welcome her, Rita Schwarzelö-Sutter.
Thank you. Dear Federal Commissioner Professor Specht-Riemenschneider, dear Mr. Dervishi, distinguished chairpersons and commissioners, members of the ICIC Secretariat, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the invitation and opportunity to speak at this ICIC. We are all united behind the ICIC's mission, and we all want to share knowledge and best practices, build capacities, and help identify what is needed for global progress. In times like these, it is I feel more important than ever for us to meet, network, and exchange ideas. In today's fast-paced world, everything seems to be in flux. This is true around the world, but we see it here in Berlin too, where the government has been in office for nearly only 2 months. But one thing will never change. We share the same planet and consequently face the same challenges. In environmental policy, democratic public participation has long played a key role in tackling the challenges of the climate and biodiversity crisis. That is why I welcome the idea behind this conference, to highlight the importance of international legal frameworks and agreements that establish and strengthen the right of access to environmental information, participation in decision-making, and access to justice in environmental matters. Examples at the Aarhus Convention we heard and the ICIC Agreement. I'm sure that all of us here have the same goal: to foster access to public information as a fundamental pillar of democratic society. At a time when democracies are being challenged around the world, information exchange between state and citizens play a key role. Freedom of information laws ensure that members of the public can require the state to provide access to existing information so that government activities are more transparent. Giving the citizens the fullest possible access to official information is essential to ensuring that they can participate effectively in administrative procedures and hold public bodies to account. Thus, we can't overstate the importance of freedom and information laws for a vibrant participative democracy. In Germany, free access to environmental information is governed by the Environmental Information Act. My ministry has lead responsibility for this legislation. The Act transposes into national law the provisions of international and European law, namely ICIC, Aarhus Convention, and the EU Directive on Public Access to Environmental Information. Where the Environmental Information Act is applicable, it takes precedence over the General Freedom of Information Act. In some areas, it provides more access to information. We like to call this the gold standard. For example, most grounds for refusal are not absolute. Interests must be weighed against each other, whereby particular importance is attached to the interest in information. Another difference is that public authorities are specifically required to publish certain environmental information. The obligation to proactively publish environmental information is intended to raise environmental awareness, helping to improve environmental protection in general. That is why the scope of the data to be published is broader than, for instance, the settlement agreement in the Federal Freedom of Information Act. Environmental information possessed by public authorities that is relevant for their work must be made available to the public actively and systematically, and to a suitable extent. The Environmental Information Act specifically lists which information must be published. In particular, authorities must publish implementation reports, summaries, and of monitoring data on activities that impact the environment, permitting decisions and environmental agreements. Currently, a lot of environmental data are stored in special databases. Unfortunately, some of these databases are complicated to use and are often designed for professional groups and experts. In theory, private individuals can also freely access this information. In practice, however, it is not always easy to find, especially considering the large number of diverse databases available. This means it is our task to provide all interest users with understandable, data-driven answers to their questions, environmental and nature conservation topics. To do this, we must engage with the public in the places where they seek information. And that, especially if not only for younger generations, it is increasingly on digital platforms. I would like to talk about 2 digital lighthouse projects and we have been working on recently. The first is the portal through.de, which the German Environmental Agency, UBA, has operated since 2009. It was greatly expanded in June 2024 and is currently undergoing a complete overhaul. The through.de portal is the German Pollutant Release and Transfer Register based on the UNECE PRTR protocol. It provides transparent and easily accessible environmental information on pollutants from industrial installations released into air, water and soil, on the transfer of pollutants via wastewater and waste, and on releases from diffuse sources such as traffic, households and agriculture. The portal puts particular emphasis on the information needs of citizens. For example, it lists German industrial installations which are especially relevant for the environment. These include coal-fired power plants, chemical plants, intensive livestock farms, food processing plants and waste incineration facilities. The list and the links provided can be used to view publicly available information on these installations online, including name and address of the installation and its associated company, details on the installation's permit, reports, on-site inspections by the competent authority, and emissions monitoring data. The goal is to centralize information on large and medium-sized industrial installations and other environmental data subject to reporting. This makes easy to find for interested individuals as prescribed in the publication of obligations of the relevant laws. The central database, through.de, uses the data collected by the federal states on installation and companies in line with reporting obligations. The information is passed on to UBA, which in turn communicates it to the European Commission. At European level, work is currently underway on developing the European Pollutant Release and Transfer Register into a new EU portal for installation-based reporting on industrial activities in Europe. This will turn it into a type of monitoring instrument for the Industrial Emissions Directive. The through.de portal will reflect this development in future. The second project I would like to talk about today is the online portal umwelt.info that was set up in 2022 in the new established National Center for Environmental and Nature Conservation Information at the UBA new location in Merseburg. It has been accessible to the general public since 27 January 2025 of this year. Umwelt.info is conceived as a central point to access to all data on the environment and nature conservation that is publicly available nationwide. The portal offers a range of functions with a search engine as its key component. It searches data sources and their metadata and provides centralized access. As at 15 June 2025, 192 sources with over 1 million data sets have been incorporated into the Umwelt.info portal. This includes geodata, time series, data from monitoring stations, information on chemicals, project fact sheets, legislation and environmental impact assessments. In future, the Umwelt.info portal will enable to access to all publicly available information on the environment and nature conservation in Germany. Data sovereignty and responsibility for the information itself remains with the authorities storing the data. The search function will be continuously improved based on user feedback and needs. In addition, AI and other tools will be used in future, for example, to improve data classification. The portal provides the original source of the data and information on use rights. The aim is to make access to already available information more transparent and user-friendly. The portal also offers an editorial service and content preparation tailored to specific target groups. Umwelt.info offers a multifaceted service for a range of user groups: the public, the scientific community, educators, administrators, business and industry. Researchers, administrative staff and NGOs also gain from the new centralized availability of environmental and nature conservation data. The portal also offers environmental education materials for students and teachers in the form of articles, infographics, podcasts and curated search results. In the long term, better availability, preparation, linking and assessment of environmental data will benefit policymakers, administrations and companies. The centralized data is potentially also a basis for company service and business models. We want to make access to information easier for all people, companies and authorities that are interested in environmental data or need such data for specific plans and decisions. This will also help speed up planning and permitting procedures. Umwelt.info makes it so much easier to find environmental data, services and information. This will increase transparency on the state of our environment and create better opportunities for civic participation in environmental protection and nature conservation. These projects show the particular relevance of environmental information law, especially in the digital world. Proactive publication by authorities increases the body of information available and is instrumental in improving the transparency of governmental activities. Today, both nationally and in the European Union, we have achieved a certain standard on access to environmental information. It is vital that we maintain and build on that standard in future. So, I think you have a fruitful discussion today, many insights and a good network, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, State Secretary. And I welcome now our next speaker here on stage. He's the Director of the Division for Digital Inclusion and Policy and Digital Transformation and Secretary of the Information for All program based at the UNESCO headquarters in Paris. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you here on stage, Guilherme Canela de Sousa Godoy.
Good morning, everyone. A real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the ICIC leadership, but also for the German Commissioner for being such a great host for us in this event. I will already offer you a spoiler of my presentation. I will be talking about the obvious. And I'm afraid to say in this current stage of the world, speaking about the obvious is almost revolutionary. So we need to defend the gains we already had to protect them. So of course you all know what I'm going to speak about. So this is just about some reminders. But to get a bit warm up, let me do a small survey with you. And we installed some lie detectors on your chairs before your arrival. So you really need to be truthful on your answers. Who of you have ever filled a freedom of information request to your government? Okay, that's good. Although it's very bad that several of you working with this is not trying your own system, right? So I think you should think about that. So of those who have filled the Freedom of Information requests, how many of you have filled the Freedom of Information requests related to environmental issues? Okay, smaller number, but still some people. So we need to also think about this, right? To put ourselves on the shoes of the citizens and of our constituencies when we are discussing these issues. Well, you all know this famous quote from the justice from the US, Luis Brandeis: sunlight is said to be the best of the disinfectants. It's interesting to understand the path dependence of freedom of information, the right to access to information in these very many years. 308 years ago, something happened in this planet that's called the Westphalia Treaty. And this is to be said the moment that the nation state was created in the format we know it. And as you probably know, the nation state is a secret story, right? Most of our things, diplomacy, army, security affairs, are more secret than transparent stories. And that's why it took Sweden 100 years to have after the Westphalia Treaty, to have the first freedom of information law. And then it took US 200 years later to have the second freedom of information law. And so we need also to see that this is not an easy endeavor. So all of you here are dealing with one of the most difficult things. Nobody likes to be transparent. That's the truth. And the government is the least one that likes to be transparent. So we need to be firm. We need to be resilient. We need to endure on that. But there are good news. So you see these graphs. We took 200 years to have 3 freedom of information laws, US, Sweden, and Finland. And then in the beginning of the 90s, there were only 14. And then the thing skyrocketed. And again, we need to valorize those gains. It's not a minor thing, again, considering the difficulties for being transparent, that in this time frame, since the 90s, we had this jump from 14 countries, 14 UN member states with freedom of information laws to 140 this year. This is a major legislative change, and we need to see what were the key drivers for that. Some of those key drivers were 1992, the Rio 10 principle, precisely related to what we are discussing in this conference, access to environmental information, but also public participation and so on. And then, of course, the changes, the so-called third wave of democracies. And then in 2003, the UN Convention Against Corruption, which is there is a strong article there on access to information and the relationship in fighting corruption. And then we had very important court decisions, like 2006 in the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, the decision Claude Reyes versus Chile, that was a decision about environmental information, by the way. And then in 2015, the SDGs, with a particular SDG 16, saying countries must have access to information, must have freedom of information laws. So those are good things, are important developments in the international arena, in the multilateral arena. So we have a kind of, we are living in a kind of a very ironical or paradoxical moment that we have more and more demand for participation. Look at protests everywhere. People demanding more transparency through the different channels, the social media and so on. But at the same time, we are living in a moment with a shrinking civic space. So we will need to deal with these contradictions, and we need to deal with that very soon to not be in even more serious trouble that we are already in. So in a way, which is a very good news, we have solved the politics of it. It's very difficult to find someone today publicly saying, We don't want to be transparent. We don't want to have a freedom of information law, although they might believe that in the deep of their hearts. But the battle of the politics of it is somehow won. It's there in the international treaties, etc., which does not mean that we have won the battle of the policy. So we need now to walk the talk of freedom of information. And for that, we can't approve laws of freedom of information and then create all these difficulties for people to actually access to information, right? It needs to be serious, it needs to be easy, it needs to be people's driven and not bureaucracy driven. Again, easy to say, not that easy to do. Right? And here starts some of our important challenges. One is related to you, to Freedom of Information Commissioners. Unfortunately, we are living in a moment where the pillars of the accountability systems in this world are being attacked. Authoritarian rulers, or candidates to authoritarian rulers, all over the world are attacking simultaneously the independent judiciary, the independent journalists, and the independent regulators like yourselves. And if we don't find a way to stop this, we will have serious trouble for democracies everywhere. Because democracies are based in these checks and balances systems. They are based in these accountability systems that requires an independent judiciary, that requires independent journalism, that requires independent bodies, such as information commissioners, to deal with these central topics that make a democracy a democracy. So we need to understand who is guarding you, the guardians of these freedom of information laws. The other thing is that, of course, we need to be back to something that in every talk about access to information we have there is the changing of the cultural mindset. Maybe a few years ago it was a different story, but still we have an issue. And with the new technologies coming into the picture, and I will be speaking about that in a minute, there is even a stronger need for this shift in the cultural mindset, particularly among the civil servants, on how we implement that. We need to be careful with this idea that because everything allegedly is open data, open that, we don't need access to information anymore as the passive request to access to information. So these still require a lot of work with your colleagues and with yourselves. We saw how many of you have never filled the freedom of information requests. This is about changing a cultural mindset. If I want to improve my service, I need to first know what the citizens suffer when they are trying to do a freedom of information request in every of your countries. For those who have never raise your hands about doing a freedom of information request. So this gentleman here in the red sweater, he filled the freedom of information request. He wants to know where is the needle. So there is someone in the government trying to find it. And this needle was not about nuclear codes or very sensitive information. It was average information. And what was the problem here? The civil servant didn't know or does not know where the information is, because it was not recorded well in the first place. So records management was always an issue when we are dealing with freedom of information policies and systems, but it's even a more complicated issue now because your authorities are producing and distributing information via social media. They are using chats of artificial intelligence. So how exactly we are grasping all this information that is being produced and distributed, and they are policy, they are statements, how these things are going to be recorded and therefore subject to a request from a citizen is a huge records management issue that will need to be dealt in very soon. And this is one of the most important elements, aside of the political challenges that I already spoke about, in implementing freedom of information policies. The other thing is there is no free lunch, right? As each one of you in this room know, if there is no money for implementing freedom of information policies and laws, there is no actual policy. You all here need to eat, you need to have your stuff, and so on and so forth. And this idea that civil and political rights, they are a kind of free of charge story, it's a wrong idea. Even for civil and political rights, we need to invest money, and we need to invest serious money. What we and you need to convince your taxpayers is that when you invest money on this, you have enormous benefits on other things. Reduction of transactional costs. Aside the fact that is a right, but even if you want to do it in a very pragmatic manner, access to information saves a lot of money to taxpayers. But we need to demonstrate this to them in order to make sure that your parliaments are approving more resources for you. And then, of course, we have the challenges of artificial intelligence, but we need to be careful with this kind of hypes, right? We see this shining star there of artificial intelligence, then we stop everything we are doing and we run towards that direction. That's not the ideal story. We need to be very prepared to defend our principles and our structures, whichever are the new technology in town. But it's true that we need to pay attention on the challenges here. Challenges, for example, what are the recommendations in terms of procurement for your governments? When they are buying this kind of technologies, what are the access to information elements that need to be included by design when your different areas of government are buying new artificial intelligence story and so on? But again, tomorrow it will be quantum computing. And for you that are data protection commissioners as well in the room, the challenges for encryption with quantum computing, it will be a nightmare if your governments are not prepared for that. So just a word of caution to not be overwhelmed by the discussion of artificial intelligence, or in other words, to not invert the cables. The important thing is how we keep the principles considering new technology and not giving the new technology the front seat for these kind of discussions, right? There is, though, a very important transformation with the technological change. That is, if 20 years ago, the amount of information on the hands of the private corporations were not comparable with the amount of information on the hands of governments, this is no longer true today. Several of these companies, including for the issue of this conference, environmental information, they have in many situations more information than the governments. So this will need to be a new discussion in the freedom of information frameworks. What exactly to do with the information that are on the hands, particularly of the large data big tech companies. Some frameworks like the DSA in Europe are trying to interact with this question, demanding these companies to be open to researchers and so on. But these we'll need to go deep on these kind of discussions regarding what to do with the information on the hands of these big corporations. And the other important thing is that we need to keep raising awareness, right? In many countries I have visited, it seems that the freedom of information law is a secret law because no one knows about it. So you guys need to make the effort that your citizens know that they have the right. It's not a favor of the civil servant to provide the information. It's a duty for the civil servant because it's the right for the citizen. And this is not clear at all for the majority of the population, as well as the benefits they would have in having more information about what their governments are doing. And of course, we need to be prepared to evaluate. and what we are doing, what is the impact of those things. And this needs to go far beyond having statistics of how many people request, how many answers, and so on. It's actually what is changing with this kind of frameworks, right? Again, easy to say, not that easy to do. So, speaking about evaluation, and I'm almost finishing, let me tell you this anecdote. It's a real story. So this is a story from Brazil. A journalist a few years ago, many years ago, filled the following Freedom of Information request to the Brazilian Air Force. How many human organs have the airplanes of the Brazilian Air Force transported in the last 6 months? As you can imagine, Brazil is a continental country, so if you have a donor of an organ in Manaus, in the Amazon forest, and the receiver is in São Paulo, the only way this heart will get from Manaus to São Paulo is in an airplane. And normally it's the airplanes of the Air Force, the official Air Force, that does this kind of thing. So the Air Force replied the Freedom of Information request within the 28 days of the law and so on. And they replied 5 organs during 6 months' time. You can see there, 3 livers, 2 hearts, and so on. So the journalist started doing his journalistic work. He got the information, and he started asking the experts, well, 5 is normal, is too much, is too few, what's the story? And then the experts in organ transplant said, no, 5 is ridiculous in 6 months. It should be much more than that. So then he filled a second Freedom of Information request, and he asked, why only 5? And they again responded, saying, well, because we give priority to authorities. So between transporting a senator or a heart, we transport the senator. A minister or a liver, we transport the minister. And then, of course, the journalist published another story saying something like this. Authorities instead of saving lives. And it was an outcry, it was a scandal, right? Again, nobody's fault. There was no corruption. It was just the way it was. So the president of the time issued a decree saying, always an aircraft of the Brazilian Air Force should be at the disposal of the organs transplant. So even if it's not being used, no one can demand to use that aircraft because an organ can be available in the next minute. So the journalists, 6 months later, asked the same question. After the decree, 6 months later, how many organs? You can see the answer there, 172. So when we say that freedom of information saves lives, it's not a metaphor. It actually saves lives. And we need to demonstrate these kind of things. Otherwise, it appears a bureaucratic exercise, right? If your taxpayers don't understand that, then you won't get more money. Because it seems they are only paying you to come to the Adlon and have these nice drinks and so on, right? So they need to understand what is the purpose of this. Final thing. The environmental story, which is as important as the previous one, because I could have other anecdotes more related to the environmental thing. But the environmental is an urgent story, as we know. We can feel by the heat in this room. And it's interacting more and more. It's not the case for all the issues related to freedom of information and access to information, but many of them, health issues, vaccines, and so on, more and more interacting with the problem of mis and dis. One of the ways, is not the only one, of countering mis and disinformation is precisely providing accurate and reliable information, which is part of what the Secretary was mentioning regarding the German policy on access to environmental information. The issue is that those that are betting their horses and their billions in putting disinformation out there about environment, they're not stupid. And then and they are rich, which is a terrible combination, being smarter and rich and evil, right? So they have been becoming more and more sophisticated about this. So this chart that was produced by a very interesting climate scientist in the US summarized to us what is happening. So in the beginning of this conversation about climate, 40, 50 years ago, the disinformation was, it's not real, it's not happening. And as you can imagine, when this is the talk, there is certain strategies to counter this. It's much easier. Then they realized that, well, this is a bit absurd. We are noticing it's happening, right? So they changed to the second strategy. Well, it's happening, but it's not us. It's just the sun and whatever, right? And it's part of life. Well, the IPCC started showing, well, it is us. Then they moved to a third strategy. Well, it's not that bad. Well, eventually we will... And then, well, this is also not working that well. They changed to a fourth strategy. Well, but we can fix it. Technology and so on. So you don't need to change your lifestyles and so on. And this is also becoming not a difficult thing to sell. And then the fifth strategy that is becoming more and more common, look, it's too late. So let's just drop the ball and keep doing whatever we do with fossil fuels. This is very interesting because for each one of those each one of this kind of framework, a different strategic communication is needed. But for each one of them, access to environmental information is fundamental. There is no good strategic communication without hard evidence. And for that, everyone that is dealing with that needs reliable and accurate information also provided through your systems. Thank you very much.